This is Out of Harm's Way, Insight, Innovation, and Action on the Toxic Drug Crisis. This is the last of 3 events that Pierce has hosted on the crisis, which was declared a provincial emergency almost 9 years ago now, but continues to kill 150 to 200 people in BC every single month. 2024 brought a small glimmer of hope with a 13% drop in fatalities, but in truth, nobody knows why the numbers have fallen to this point or when they might rise again. Year after year, we tally the number of people killed by unregulated drugs, but we have nothing in place to actually understand that, to manage it, to build on successes, or to do more of what's working and less of what isn't. Meanwhile, our commitment to proven harm reduction approaches feels less certain than before the crisis. So that's a worrying thing. All of which is to say, please don't take that 13% decline in deaths as a sign that it's over. Yes, we did see far fewer deaths from toxic drugs in 2024 than we have since 2020, but 2,253 people still died in a totally preventable crisis. And that number is still more than 4 times higher than it was a decade ago. So we're still in the wilderness on this issue. We opened the series January 29th with panelists who brought us the history, context, and complexity of this issue. And then the University of Victoria's drug checking service providers gave us a breakdown of the chemical structure of the drugs most commonly sold on Victoria's streets. At our second event, February 26th, we had 6 local organizations bringing us their own perspectives around the work they're doing to intervene in the toxic drug crisis, and a terrific panel on evidence and the moral panic that stops us from acting on that evidence. Today, we're going to open with some words from Guy Felicella, who I will introduce shortly, and close with a keynote from Anne Livingston, who has been a leading advocate and activist around harm reduction and mobilizing drug users here in BC for 30 years. In between those keynotes, we have the great fortune to bring you a dialogue among 6 people with personal experience of substance use. They're going to be talking about their own experiences toward recovery and wellness and how BC's scarce services around substance use helped and hindered that journey. When it comes to substance use, we typically talk about recovery as though it has to mean abstinence or nothing. That's simply not true. Some people will always require substances as part of their daily lives, much the way that I, as an asthmatic, rely on drugs to help me manage my health, or the way someone with diabetes needs insulin. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge this event is taking place in Lekwungen territories and invite Rachel Atleo of the Songhees Nation to share some words, and Sean Bartleman of the Sartlip Nation to share a song. I would also like to thank and welcome Elder Gail Sam of Sartlip Nation for being with us today. As we move through the proceedings of the day, it is important to remember whose territories we are in and to consider how displacement from homeland and culture is interwoven through the toxic drug crisis. We are so fortunate to be able to videotape all our events so they can live on and be shared wildly on the Peers YouTube channel. Thank you to our videographers, John Carswell and Lorraine Skolin, for making that happen. We're very grateful that Rachel, Sean, Gail, and our cedar brushers in the room across the hall. So out that door, out another door, there will be the room with the cedar brushers. They're all here to help us through this day. So let's get this day started. First, I'd like to invite up Rachel Atleo and Sean Bartleman.
Asiam Nistrelaja, Asa Rachel Atleo, Chisa Ethelson at Lekwungen, Aishka Quans Ane Etla Atia Enoch, Aikwan Stagel at the Elanganga at Lekwungen, Aikwanis Kunanga Hela, Aishka CM. My honorable friends, I am Rachel Atleo. I am from here, Lekwungen. Thank you for coming here today. Welcome to the home territory of the Lekwungen people. It is good to see you all. Thank you, honorable ones. And thank you for asking me to welcome you all with the work you do in a humble way. Enjoy this afternoon and hope your journey home is safe. Aishka CM.
I'd like to welcome harm reduction and recovery advocate Guy Felicella up to provide us with some opening remarks. Guy was here with us for our first event as well, and we liked him so much, we brought him back. He's going to give us a few words and also facilitate the dialogue as a person with his own lived experience with substances and recovery. Thanks. Welcome, Guy.
It's nice to be welcomed back. For a long time, that probably wasn't the case in my world, so very humbled to be here in your guys' community. Obviously, the topic is, in our world today, is very challenging. I think what we have is the created division of the politicalization of harm reduction, and sadly, it's not helping the people who we are trying to support on the street. However, what I want to note is that what's vitally important is that I see a lot of people who work in harm reduction services that are doing the vital work that's needed to keep people stable, alive, access to other services. So it's really important to reflect on the work that you guys do as people that make a huge difference and impact in people's lives. Like, you guys are serious heroes. And oftentimes when they reflect on what a hero looks like is somebody that, maybe rescues somebody off of a mountain, or a firefighter going into a burning building. Well, you're going into a burning building of somebody's life and reviving them, bringing them back to life, supporting them and caring. So you guys, in my books, are badass heroes. And so never forget, that the work that you do is that you often didn't ever change the circumstance in my life because maybe there wasn't the right support or the proper opening, but you changed a moment in my struggles in those circumstances, which actually helped me get to a place that I needed to get to. And so the reflection of that, which is in our world today, is that people constantly are looking at focusing on harm reduction as being the attributing factors to everything in our world. This is incorrect. And so we have to really kind of bring awareness of how vital harm reduction has been, a safety net that's provided security for people who use substances or struggle with addiction. And so one of those most important things that I think we can do as people is to, bring that education to other people. And the best people to talk to are the ones that don't get it, not the ones that do get it. And I think what we have to do is we have to understand and do it in a way that's very diplomatic, because I've sat in a lot of rooms with a lot of people, and a lot of people with conservative views. And however, they do understand the need for harm reduction. And so they get caught in this vacuum of ideological beliefs. But you can break down those walls just by simplifying the exact same thing that I've always simplified with, is if you look at bike helmets, seat belts, or other measures of harm reduction services that we provide and use daily in our lives. Does it stop the crashes from happening? No, but it reduces the harms of those crashes when you have a bike helmet on your head. Similarly, the same thing with harm reduction. And harm reduction doesn't reduce poverty. It doesn't end homelessness. It doesn't, enable addiction. It enables people to live. And so all harm reduction that we have does is really reduce the harms of the poison drug supply. That's it. It's not rocket science. It's the solution against the drug supply that's saturated our society. And one of the things that I often like to reflect on of the importance of harm reduction is that it keeps people alive and does provide the opposite of addiction, which is connection. And that human connection can change the directions of people's lives through harm reduction services to access recovery and treatment services. Unfortunately, if we're going to blame harm reduction for the unaddressed societal issues, we're never going to get anywhere. And another thing, if you would actually equate that to recovery services, because it sounds really good for everybody to go and get off drugs. I mean, I wish it was that easy. I wish it was that easy for people that struggled with them. It wasn't that easy in my life. But the one thing that I looked at is that if the madness of blaming harm reduction would be essentially the same madness as blaming recovery for not keeping people sober. And we would never do that. So why do these targeting scapegoats target a service that all it does is reduce the harms? We are blaming, or political oppositions is looking at blaming a harm reduction services, a health service, instead of actually looking at the drug supply which is run by organized crime. You're blaming a health issue. They're laughing all the way to the bank. And so I just want to kind of close on, this is probably the most important federal election of our life. I don't think there's anything that I can stress bigger of the dynamics that will really change. And I went through the Harper area, the mandatory minimums. I went through it all. This will get so far worse. What they just cut back all the services, even the ones that are existing today, they will look to cut them. And so I don't tell you who to vote for, but I want to tell you, you got a voice and you got to vote. And you got to get out there and do it. Like, you got to vote, because it's that important in our world right now. And for me, I hope that inspires you to do the same thing, because it's really important to voice your vote, and it does matter when we often think that it doesn't. I'm telling you, it matters, especially in our day and age. If we could get to a place in our world where we continue to have all the tools, which would be multiple different harm reduction services, access to treatment and detox, but one of the major components is that if people don't have a safe landing spot to go to after treatment, which is stabilized housing, connection to community, and also purpose with employment, we're really missing the whole target here. It's not about just going on getting off drugs and getting your life together. It's about addressing all the social determinants of health that happens after a person goes through treatment. And that's why it's a chronic relapsing condition, because we've not done a significant effort in helping people after treatment. If you look at people who are successful in this, and I will tell you this, I look at people that had success is that they found purpose, they got a job, they got their families back, they were connected to a community. All those factors are the most important thing in some. Success isn't going through treatment. Success is what's going to happen after treatment. And that's the success in people's lives. Now, whether you use drugs or don't have an issue with them, we all know if we struggle with addiction, is one thing that I look back on my life is that I was no longer using the drugs. The drugs were using me. And when I got to that place in my life where I could no longer live the way I was living, I made the first step. And I want to tell you, if we don't make the first step, nothing changes. And I know how challenging it is. So just remember, when somebody shows up your door to make that first step, we have to be available, we have to be there, and we have to get them to the place that they need to get to. Whether that's somebody getting on a medication program, stabilizing their lives. I don't care what your recovery looks like. I just want you to have better health and wellness. And so I hope this inspires everybody, and welcome, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for those great words, Guy. I just wanted to draw your attention to the faces. If you've been a regular at this event, you'll know this is Mom Stop the Harm loved ones photos. There are 300 photos here, and it takes about 18 minutes. So if we were to put up a PowerPoint of 17,000 people who've died in the last 9 years, it would take 28 hours. So that kind of brings home the weight of how many people we have lost and the beautiful faces. I really thank Mom Stop the Harm for allowing us to bring these beautiful faces into the room to remember who we're here talking about. So I'd now like to welcome up the people who will be participating in today's main event. That's the panel sitting in our lovely living room setup. Can I welcome up Trevor Botkin, recovering substance user and community leader. Where are you, Trevor? There you are. Tasia McLucky. Matthias Millette, an Indigenous artist known as Stax on the local music scene. Back to writing and rapping in his recovery. Fred Cameron, Senior Manager at Solid Outreach Society here in Victoria. Sakani Dalkath, facilitator, storyteller, and advocate, all the way from Vancouver. And Guy Felicella, who will be facilitating this conversation. Come on up, find the most comfortable seats. So everybody is, you know how to have a dialogue, so I'll let you all just begin.
Okay, well, here you guys go. Why don't we, everybody just start off by introducing themselves, and so the audience can get to know you guys a little bit better on what you do and who you are, and we'll start.
With me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Takani Dakel. I was with the keynote. I wasn't feeling well enough to do that. I'm showing up where I can, and being here is important, and I really wanted to thank like Peers Victoria, and I feel like that's what a community does, is we kind of support and help each other show up however we can. So I just wanted to say that first of all. I don't know what to say right now other than like, I guess what's important, this conversation is like doing work, and I started in the downtown east side as an outreach worker, and we've made it up to doing the Speakers Bureau, and we did the Speakers Bureau, which was created by people with lived and living experience, and it's a workshop that goes to businesses and service providers, and we host conversations around stigma and people who use substances, and we kind of help them unpack that stigma in a safe space to where they can say whatever they want or whatever's on their mind, and we have some very well-trained people who use substances are able to be there and share their stories. And I feel like what makes that work really important is because like when I started that work, I lost my brother to a fatal drug poisoning, and it was like I lost a lot of people. I'm from the downtown east side, and that's where I say that's where I grew up, because that's where I feel like I became to know who I was more, and to really start living for the first time in my entire life. And I lost my brother, and this opportunity came up, and I said, you know, I don't know anything about harm reduction really, and I don't know how to even talk about it properly. And I lost my brother right at the same time as this opportunity, and I said, you know what, this is important. This is something I have to do. I have to push through. And you know, oftentimes we're dealing with so much like insurmountable amount of loss, like to the groups that we're running, to the people that are coming into the drop-in, and our friends, people that we grew up with in the downtown east side are just going, and the face of the downtown east side is changing. And that's not my words, the face of the downtown east side is changing. That's from Angel Gates, her name is. Angel Gates was like a powerhouse in harm reduction in the downtown east side. But I guess that's kind of where I am now.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I work with Solid Outreach Society at this point. I guess I came in as a man a few years ago living in transitional housing, and I got in as a research assistant initially. I came to a meeting that I thought was a one-off for a $50 stipend, and I'm still here now. I was a bartender, depending on who asked me last. I could do just about anything you asked if you were paying me. Now I talk for a living, Solid Outreach. So I was trying to remember all of the different sites we've had over the years. I came in right when the harbor opened, and just out of necessity, I very quickly became the manager, then coordinator of that site. But I think I've opened 15 consumption sites over the past few years. I don't know anyone other than Echo Culpus who can say that. We were the drug users, and nobody trusted us. Nobody in their right mind would hand Solid the keys. And we've shown up every day over and over again to prove everyone wrong. And we've come from, you know, we had one employee, a man named Mark Wilson, a lot of you know him, one of the heroes in our community that we don't talk about enough. But by answering everyone's questions over and over again, we have about 100 staff. Solid runs 9 sites across town. We have mobile outreach teams. That said, the problems that we're seeing out on the street are bigger today than they were 5 years ago. So take those little victories. We have to celebrate something, but we have to be accepting new ideas and modifying everything we do based on the need of the people on the street. So I hope that we can find some answers here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, so my name is Matthias Millette. I was actually born and raised right here in Victoria. My journey into frontline work started when I first got clean, and that was, I'm coming up on 4 years sober off the fentanyl side. It basically, thank you very much. Yeah. It basically tore my life apart from everything from my family, my kids, and I ended up getting locked up in Wilkinson Road and did a 7-month stretch there, and then got bailed to New Roads Recovery Center, Therapeutic Recovery Center out on the highway there. It's the old juvie, and I took it seriously, right? I ended up doing the work, taking accountability, showing up, and really wanting my life back. And I got a piece of paper with a job opportunity, and it was with the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness. And that was about just over 3 years ago now. I'm coming up 3 years there, and I started as a support worker, doing cooking, and now I'm a cultural mentor there, working the front lines with an amazing team and a group of people that I would do anything for at this point. And I'm just super excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
I'm Tasia. I am a manager with Solid Outreach up in the valley, in the Comox Valley, Comox First Nation. And between a multitude of hats, between the CAT, working with ABI, other nonprofits, we were experiencing quite a bit of death in our community. And I actually phoned Guy one day after losing someone who was pretty near and dear to me. And I remember it was pouring rain, and I pulled over on the side of the road, and I thought, like, what the fuck? What do I do as one person? And he actually happened to be meeting with our medical health officer the next day, to which I got a phone call, and I told her that if we do not have a safe inhalation site in our city, like immediately, that I was gonna put a sea can in the middle of the city hall parking lot that we were gonna occupy, and we were gonna do it anyways. Thank you for starting me on this journey and listening to me and when you have a life. And now we are opening our first safe inhalation site in the city of Courtenay, which I gratefully be able to operate, but it doesn't take away from what we have experienced in the interim. I do this work because I come from, one, a life of privilege. I was lucky enough to get out of substance use before just as fentanyl was hitting my community, or else I would likely not be here. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and that's who I am. Thanks.
I'm Trevor Botkin. Where do you start? So I, as a young kid, I didn't fit in well into my community or into my school, or kind of growing up, I was awkward. I found a place to make a living in the construction industry. It served me well and allowed me to put food on the plate and afford a very nice living. But it wasn't without its trappings. It didn't really give me much place to work on some of the trauma I had from my childhood, or unpack sort of my identity as a male. Like what I was seeing modeled in men around me it just wasn't working for me. I didn't know it then, but I was kind of fighting up against it. Long story short, I found my way into a treatment center in 2019. A lot of privilege led me there, a lot of luck, a lot of miracles, and like has been said by both of my colleagues here, once I saw what was possible, and once I saw directly how sick I was, and how much of my situation was beyond my control, I grew an appetite for my own recovery and my own growth, and to find my place of being comfortable in this world that I'd never felt comfortable in. leaving treatment, in the years that followed, I've somewhat unintentionally been brought into the conversation around men in the trades. Around 2019, 2020, we started noticing how many, especially men in the industry, were dying from suicide and or unintentional drug poisonings. And you know, being that there's a lot of stigma and a lot of shame in the industry around substance use, which is incredible looking back. But there's not a lot of us that'll share our stories or talk. And so I saw, as I kept being brought into these conversations, I started to just accept that maybe this is part of my purpose, is to start to share with others and try and change the conversation around men and substance use, but also mentor workers of all ages on how to let go of some of the things, some of the identity constructs that we carry, and look at how they're making us sick, and trying to show up as more fully healed and safer men in our communities, not just for ourselves, but for others. And so it's been a great privilege to be continued to be asked into rooms like this to talk about it, about the subject, and to share on the topic of recovery, and also the topic of, like, you know, recovery is not a linear thing. And so this idea that there's going to be a simple one and done solution to it is, you know, I think our society needs to start embracing the idea that as long as somebody's engaging, they're in recovery. Like, that's it. That's all there is to it for me. Anyways, thank you.
Can I get a high five on that? That'd be nice.
All right, let's go with, you know, what was the experience that kind of, you know, over time influenced you with your substances, but also motivated you to make changes? Kind of a two-part question if anybody wants to tackle it. You wanna?
I guess over time, what really influenced my substance use would be like, when I started, obviously, a lot of trauma that I wasn't able to deal with at the moment. And, you know, finding something that made me feel happy, you know, or gave me, I guess, a break from, like, the chaos that my mind was creating. And, you know, I over time, I started taking more personal responsibility with it. Before, I used to just, of course, the people that abused me held some responsibility because I was a child. But when I started becoming an adult and I was living on my own and, you know, struggling on my own, I was the one sleeping on the street. They weren't. You know, I was torturing myself at that point. And, you know, coming to that realization that, you know what, I'm not gonna live a very long life like this. And I was doing street-based survival sex work at the time to provide my drug habit. And I read this poster, and it was actually very grim, and they don't have that poster anymore. But it really helped me. It shocked me because it was a poster of a street-based sex worker getting into a hearse. You know, like a hearse pulling up, and, you know, she's gonna get in, right? And it shared a stat on there. One of the stats was that the survival rate of a street-based sex worker who was also using substances was 7.5 years that they can keep doing that. Like, that's 7.5 years, like, nonstop, right? And at that point, I was at 6 years of doing that, and I never left 5 blocks. I stayed in the downtown east side in a 5-block radius. I never needed to go anywhere else. And that's when I was like, I got to do something different. And that something different was, I got an opportunity to go to Kelowna, and on the way to Kelowna, I didn't really point it out to anyone else. I didn't think anyone else would care, right? But I saw rabbit footprints in the snow when we were driving along, and it made me remember that, like, there are other worlds out there, you know. And I grew up on the reserve, and we hunted a lot. So, like, seeing, like, animal footprints was so important to me because that's what we lived off of, you know. And it reminded me of, like, you know, things my uncle would say about our spirituality and how it's related to all the animals out there. And, that's when I started, things started getting different for me. And I started, went to detox one time, went to treatment one time, went to a recovery house one time. And I'm not saying those times worked, because they didn't. It took 5 years, probably about 5 years, for me to actually stop, to get to the point to where I didn't need that to feel happy. I didn't need substances to feel happy anymore. And there's no time, I feel like that's important. What you said is that it's not linear, and there's no like one time and you're done. It took like a lot of people to really believe in me. And when I spoke earlier about my first job as outreach worker, I was still using, and the books call it problematic substance use. That's like the technical term, meaning that my drug habit was getting in the way of me paying rent, me paying for my phone, me showing up at work. And that organization didn't fire me when I didn't show up. They didn't get upset at me if I seemed to be a little bit too tired. They just kept me there and kept training me and trained me up to doing office work, and that was really important, I feel like. And when I think of my journey through substance use and getting to a place to where I felt well, well enough to start, I felt like throwing off those like shrouds of like my trauma and being able to like deal with it. And I guess the biggest thing there was given the opportunity to believe in myself and to deal with it was like a big game changer for me.
I think what really stood out for me, what you were saying in that, was the connection that you had with the tracks. And I think what that made me think of was on my way down here, my friend Amanda and I, we were going over these questions, and each one, and I kind of pinpointed my relationship, to substance use, to this one moment in my life. And what you brought back for me was my connection to my family, breakdown of family, connection to culture, connection to everything that I really had. And my relationship to substances was around, how do I stay in control when I've lost everything that I knew, to like feel safe. And so thanks for that. I always thought it was this one moment, and my relationship to substances and why there was such a deep connection was that breakdown of my culture, my family, the separation, all of the things. And you're right, the moment of change is not, we don't have this one moment in life. We have this collective of what we know, whether like passed down, historically taught, given birth, whichever. When those pieces start to come back together for us through nonprofits, through work, through friends and chosen family, blood family, whichever, like that's when things start to come back together. Sure, there might be one moment where we make a different decision, but like it's ingrained. And we're not really in a society where we're taught that. Yeah, thanks for that.
This is a very big question for someone with my background. First time I got drunk was at Christmas dinner, and I was 8 years old, and the kids got about this much wine in a cup. I didn't make it until Grace. I reached out and I drank my sip, and my world lit up. I then reached out and grabbed my sister's wine, slugged it, and I was on the ground and the world was spinning, and my mom had to phone my aunt, who was a bartender, and say, "Fred's drunk on the floor, what do I do?" When I finally tapped out, I was a crack smoker who thought he was Jesus. So there was a 25-year period there with all kinds of ups and downs. It wasn't always bad. Those are two terrible moments. But I also had times where, I was a hockey player, and that was a part of our bonding. I was a bartender. I hung out with musicians all the time. I remember the 2003 NDP Leadership Convention. I was a BC-wide Young New Democrat, and I was out on the campaign trail, but my lips were stained purple with Merlot. Alcohol was present in everything I ever did. One of the things that took me a few years of recovery for it to occur to me, but I had always thought that I just needed a little bit more money. I needed some good luck, and I wouldn't need alcohol anymore. I wouldn't party if only this happened. I needed the girl. Because of the girl, I was out drinking. No matter what, I had a reason why I was drinking and using, though. Eventually, I started to find some success, and I started to make the money. My last bender was a 5-month, 150 straight days I smoked crack. And that came on the tail end of, I had an incredibly good spring as a roofer, and I started to get somewhere between 3 and 5 houses a week were getting done. And when I got paid, I couldn't handle it. I could not handle the success. Then when I tried to get out of it, I had thought addiction, my understanding of addiction was you take a little bit of time off and the drugs will lose their hold on you. That's not how it works. I didn't know what anxiety was. I thought anxiety was an excuse my sister used to not do things until I found out I was in a panic attack and I was in psychosis. I remember the first time I had wanted to get out. Everyone around me knew that I had a problem, and I had all kinds of trauma, and my family was split on very bad terms. I moved around a lot. These are very common themes. We hear this all the time if you go down into recovery rooms. There's a man named Gordon Harper he's the founder of Umbrella Society, and my father got him started and gave him his first drink back in about 1968, and I reached out to Gordon when I was first hitting bottom. Unfortunately, it was 16 years later that I reached out to Devin James, who also worked at Umbrella, Gordon helped him to get sober, and I reached out to him. No joke, it sounds made up. It's like something out of a new big book, and one day they'll make a new one, but I sent him a text today that I my unmanageable. And I sat there I was living in a decrepit crack shack in West Edmonton, and we ran out of money on a renovation. The whole place was covered in drywall dust, and I'm sitting with a blanket over me because the window was broken. It's minus 30 in December, and the whole place is covered in drywall dust, but there are 2 little clean patches on the floor where tears are falling off my cheeks. And I'm sitting there staring at the phone or in the blank space, or the empty space that used to be occupied by my TV that was in the pawn shop. And that's what my life had become. I sat there staring at it, and I remember hitting send. I just started fucking bawling, sorry to swear like that. I had a spiritual awakening, high on crack, sitting on a couch. It changed my life, man. I could talk for hours, but we've only got one, so I'll pass it on there.
I want to say about, I don't know the exact day, but Fernwood Community Center, I think I had been secretly using where I thought no one was really paying attention to what I was doing, and I was trying to sell dope down in Pandora again, and there's probably months and months of this lying. Family, my ex, my kids, everything like that. And I got in this huge fight with my ex, and I was at the Fernwood Community Center, and it was that exact day that there was actually payphones back then. That's how long ago that was. And I ended up hanging up the phone, and I spoke it out loud. I basically kind of spoke it into existence that I love heroin, right? Because there's that love for the heroin that took away my pain, took away my shame, my regret, and it just sent everything downhill from there. And and I remember that day so clearly, where there wasn't anything else that mattered after that, right? It didn't matter about anything else. I was basically a ghost in town. If I wasn't selling dope or using dope, I was sleeping. And if I did sleep, because then you're mixing it with side and everything like that. So I found every excuse in the world to keep my addiction going. And when I think back think back on it, it was the fear and like that fear of failing again, right? And letting people down that you love and that you care about, that you really can't be around because all you're doing is using at their house. Like I spend hours in the bathroom at family members' houses and stuff like that, just avoiding them at all costs. Show up to events and show up to shows, glasses on, everyone's like, oh, you're doing so good, you know, like, because I wasn't doing blow anymore or crack, right? I was like, literally, I was doing the downers and no one could really tell, really, you know, unless they seen my eyes, which I thought shades were hiding that, and it didn't. So I think the biggest factor this time when I got clean was walking into Wilkinson Road, and everybody I grew up with, doing time with since 2009, and I'm on this unit, and well, for the ones that are still alive, right? Like we got so many people that are passing away, dying, overdoses, killed, or whatever. I get on this unit and it's the same old crew, and they're talking about the same old shit. They're talking about, oh, we got this coming in, we got, you know, this and that, and, you know, my girl did this, and it was just the same old conversations I've been hearing since 2009. Some of them are in the exact same cell, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I gotta fix my, you know, I gotta fix my fucking life, man. There's no way to live. Like I was 35 back then, 34. I'm done with this shit, right? So I ended up moving to a unit, and it was a unit called the Right Living Unit in Wilkinson Road. It was like a new unit. You get paid more money, you do programming from 6:30 or 7 o'clock to 6 at night. And yeah, man, a lot of people tried cracking off and making jokes about it and shit like that. And here I am today, man. I'm just like, you know, that was the breaking point. Seeing everybody there talk about the same shit, I'm just like, man, I'm better than this, dude. I'm not even better than this in the fact that I don't want what they're talking about. I don't want the dope to come in the unit. You know, I'd love that, but end of the day, it's the same old stories and stuff like that, right? So I deserve better, and then I picked my shit up and got it going.
Nice.
Yeah, that's it.
Here's the tricky part for me with this part of the conversation is that, for myself, I associate the word recovery with abstinence. And then what happened? So for me, I've had problematic substance use with a multitude of different substances. I lost my kids, who I'm grateful that are here today, and yeah, moved back with me, got them back December 1st, 2020. Yeah, thank you. Huge success. And then what? I work hard. I'm proud of what I do. I want them to be proud of me. I get into a position that I'm in now. I'm proud to work for who I work for. I don't believe in reinventing a wheel. Like, we don't have time to reinvent wheels. They're doing it well. So banged down that door for a good year and a half, and then they finally let me in. And I am relentless. I'm also, you know, I'm surrounded by a history of that on paper doesn't look so good. And so, you know, things get hard. I'm working really hard, and now my use of alcohol, for example, because for me, abstinence-based recovery is not a part of my journey. And that has worked for me until it hasn't. And so, you know, in recent months, when I'm struggling and my alcohol intake has increased, and my kid writes me a fucking Mother's Day card that makes a joke about wine, who do I tell? Because I can't tell my family. Because that's what they're waiting for. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know, how could you do this? Look at the success that you have. Look at the position that you've got yourself in. You got everything back. And so there is this pressure around the language that we use around recovery and what that means and how we recover. And I realize that this kind of leads into one of the stigma questions. And I mean, like, I'm a white, middle-class woman born and raised in BC. Like, unless I was a dude, it does not actually get much better than that for me, for privilege, for access to treatment, to services. But I can't say out loud, hey, you know what, I actually have a problem with alcohol. Because like those like little humans, I'll lose them. And so just because I think, again, like we sit up here in the positions that we're in, sometimes that adds to it. And so it's important to be proud of where you've come from and everything that you've overcome and where you're at. And also to remember that we are also human beings. And that we are likely going to fall down on our face in the same way because this is how we've coped our whole lives. So it makes sense. And the repercussions of that, because of the positions that we get ourselves in, because, I mean, we didn't survive what we went through and got here because we weren't hustlers and we didn't work really hard. Like, I got here because I freaking earned this. I also can go the opposite way, which is likely. And I think I just wanted to say that. I think, you know, it's, yeah, the risk gets, when I was in a position of, I lost my kids MCFD, they went to live with their granny and their dad, went through 2 years of court, like all of the things. And a few different treatment centers, detox, so much money that took me years to pay off because I made too much money that I couldn't get support, but then didn't make enough money to actually pay for it. It's a weird space. And yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. Anyways, yeah, we're still human and we're still gonna fall down in the same way. And I think that's important to say, and that it, like, it's okay. And I have good people like my friend Amanda who came down here and I can talk to. Like, it just, yeah, this is what it's like being a person with lived experience and living experience of busting our ass to get where we are. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we come back to the stigma here in a few minutes, so I won't get too carried away on responding quite yet, but yeah, you're right. You've done the work, you deserve the credit. I came up, just constantly questioning my belonging in the world and not seeing who I was reflected in the people around me or in the expectations of my parents or my peers. Fred shared when first time I drank, it was this thing gave me permission to be me. It opened up a lot of access to me to find my personality and stuff like that. And then I found my way into the construction industry, and the relationship between trades and substances is as old as the trades are, right? Like the stereotype is not unjustified in a lot of ways. We work hard, we play hard. There's a cowboy spirit there that I always was proud to belong to. As I started to rise through the leadership ranks of construction sites, I started finding myself at tables with people that were educated in a more academic way, and it started to bring up a lot of the feelings I had when I was a kid, and this is all filtered through 6 years of a lot of work in my recovery, right? Like, had no knowledge of this, of what was going on, but I was suddenly starting to feel very other than in the world and very, like I didn't fit in anymore, I wasn't welcome, I wasn't smart enough, and my substance use became my method of showing up in my job, in my world, being comfortable. It gave me me. It gave me me. Looking back, I think there's no point in my life I haven't been on a spiritual journey. I just lacked the understanding or spiritual wisdom to make sense of it all. But essentially, I was just trying to find myself or feel comfortable in the world. And some things happened in my life, and I was starting to see some failure in my job and drop a few balls. At that point, I didn't know what was me. I wanted to tell myself it was me and I was a failure. I didn't know what part was my runaway addiction. Look, I hit a bottom. I was starting to not fit in my industry, not being able to keep up. I was not able to hide my substance use. I was starting to fail in the only thing I thought I was cut out for. And long story short, it led me to March 19th, 2019, when I was like, I'm not living another day like this. I can't. And I was going to take the ultimate way out. Something shifted in that, and it honestly was nothing to do with any heroic or heartfelt idea that I was going to be found by my mother or leave my daughters behind, who I was very estranged from at that point. But it was honestly vanity. My image didn't fit with the choice I was about to make. I valued my image as an identity as a hard worker more than anything else. And it occurred to me that here I am in this moment, and somebody might say that I chose just to quit and not do the work. People will find me confused, not knowing that I had this experience in life and that I just chose not to do the work or ask for help, really is what it boiled down to. And so I chose to divert myself from my plan, wake my mother up at 4 in the morning, and the rest is like good luck and privilege after that. I managed to get in a treatment center the next day. That doesn't happen. And about 40 days later, I started to see what was possible. Like, I started to understand my experience from like a therapeutic standpoint. I started to learn some of this wisdom that goes along with like showing up in the world and just feeling content and whole. And although it didn't solve the problem then, I started to realize that things could be different for me. There was just more work to do. And it stood to reason at that time that if I was a hard work shouldn't be something that I should be scared of. And so I just went for it. And I've had the good fortune and good luck of being able to sustain my abstinence for 6 years. But that's a lot of good luck. And if I relapsed or had a setback tomorrow, that's what it would be. So I believe strongly that like the average lay person doesn't understand what recovery is and how hard it is to maintain. My hardest days now are the days where I've had great success. The days where everything's gone right and I'm a greedy person. I want it to be more better, and I fantasize and let these thoughts creep in of how I could make this day better. I don't struggle as much with the hard part, but the hard feelings. But, I got to admit, even in recovery circles and in recovery communities, there's a lot of stigma against recovery that doesn't include all-out commitment to there's a commitment. It's not the lack of commitment. And if it doesn't involve recovery, there's some circles that can be very judgmental of that, and I think that's needless.
I think for me is that I beat myself into an oblivion and realized that the way I was living my life struggling was just too overwhelming. I mean, lived experience is something that you can't buy, but it will cost you your life. And at the end, the reality of my world is that I really had, my options were about 3, either find a way to do something different, wind up in prison for the rest of my life, or I'm going to wind up dead. One of those 3 things were going to happen no matter what. And I think I got to the place in my world where I just got sick and tired of doing the same thing. And when you're constantly, I found the most interesting thing about trauma, because I think a lot of it's not about drugs, it's about pain. And for myself is that I wouldn't deal with it. And it's not something that I wanted to look at, but one thing I've understood with trauma is that regardless of you dealing with it or not, you're dealing with it. It'll deal with you. And so the negativity of the consequences for me not dealing with it was the drugs that I would use to address it. And so, but I couldn't find myself a way to function out of that and to create a new life, although I was constantly trying. And then the biggest challenge is being socially connected to a community of the downtown east side of Vancouver. I mean, the one thing that I kept looking at is like, well, where do I go? What does my life look like outside of that? And there's a lot of fear in that. I could never get outside of that. I could go away for like a little, maybe it's a vacation, whether you go to prison. I used to call those moments where I'd go either to prison or I'd go to treatment as like a little vacation, but I'd always gravitate back. And it wasn't because I necessarily wanted to, it's because there was nothing else available, and to create that sense of community. But in the end, I started to realize that even though I felt that I was connected to community, I was going to die in that community. And luckily for me, I was brought back to life because I always had somebody there. And even when I was overdosing, listen, there wasn't naloxone on the street. There was 2 times that occurred outside the supervised consumption site, and just happened by fate that somebody was there and saw me. Otherwise, those moments would have never happened. It was after that, the 4 times that occurred at a supervised consumption site. And the one thing that nobody ever reflected on is that nobody knew what was going through my mind. They just saw me as a person who was using drugs and struggling, and that's what they judged me for. But they didn't know that I was trying every day to figure something out. Like, it's just, you try and you constantly are trying, but people don't celebrate that part of it. We look at people that have become successful and think that it's successful, but I think the thing that you have to remember is that everybody's trying. And I think we can motivate people to try, but in the end, it was really the gap bridging between harm reduction and recovery services that got me to where I had to get to. But I also needed a lot more help with that, because my success didn't happen in a treatment center. My success happened after I left treatment. But I needed somebody to teach me how to pay off my debts. I didn't know how much money I owed. I didn't have any ID. I didn't know how to get a driver's license. I didn't know how to open a bank account. I didn't have a resume. My resume had Expo 86 on it. That was it. That was my job. I worked at Boston Pizza. And when you go and apply for a job and you have a piece of paper and it has one thing on it, I mean, people looked at you and just were like, wow. And then you don't have the qualifications. And so you don't get a job. And I remember I wanted this thing so bad that in recovery I went into it like it was going to be my job, because I couldn't get a job. So I did it like it was my job. And I showed up every day and I said, you're not going to hire me, I'm going to volunteer here. And I volunteered at a place. And then the guy did hire me. And that's how I had to do it. But I tell you, it's never been easy. Our world doesn't make it easy because, see, listen, we say that we want people to get better, but then essentially we're going to judge them for the past that they once lived and bring that up. Whether we have different values, different opinions, or different motives for recovery, or whatever our recovery looks like. If it doesn't align with some people's beliefs, we tend to go out and judge them for it. Or we bring up their past. And so that becomes like, this handcuff that we put on people. If you want people to have opportunity, it has to be available. And then once I started to develop those skills, I had skills on the street, and the streets taught me a lot of stuff. I can see people coming a mile away. I can see people's motives. I can just talk to you for 5 minutes and really start to get a picture of you. And those are really important assets. And sometimes even when I do talks in companies, I say the same thing and they say the same thing to me, like, damn, that's how we work. And so they work similarly. You have assets. I think what we have to learn is how to use them properly. But I needed somebody to show me how to do that. I needed somebody to take my hand. My best decision got me into the downtown east side and I couldn't get out of it. But what I tell you, is like most of us here, is that once I removed myself from the place that I could barely survive in my addiction, because you can't thrive in the place that you barely survived in. It's not going to happen. I had to remove myself from that. But I remember in the end, I had a bag of dope and nobody wanted to get high with me anyway. So I didn't have any friends. They didn't want to hang out with me. So, and when you had substance users constantly telling you, like, dude, you're terrible at this, they keep bringing you back to life. I mean, you start to read the writing on the wall that it was time for me to go do something different. Even drug users said I was no good at what I was doing anymore. So when you have that kind of reality and then a reflection in my own life, but I will tell you, the easiest thing I've ever done, and it took me 31 years to do, was get off the drugs. The hardest thing that I've ever had to do, and I still have to do in my life, is regulate my emotions. And why? That is the part, because I just used drugs to regulate my emotions for so long. And so I had to learn how to do something different and outside of that. And so whatever it is that you enjoy doing that regulates your emotions, whether it's eating, going to the gym, running, going for a hike, walk, playing with your kids, I don't know, playing poker, whatever. Those are the things that really transcended my life and changed the trajectory of my life, was that now I understand, but I'm also okay with how I feel. And I also don't care what people say. A lot of people can say stuff, but if they're only talking about my past, then they don't even know me, because the past didn't define me. It's who I am today that does. And just remember that as well, is that every day that you get up and you do something better or do something different, you don't have to keep looking back at the past, because that's the thing that will just pull you back. At some point, we have to just get to a place where I just didn't want to feel sorry for myself anymore. I put in the work. I wanted to work to change my life, and once I did that, my life got extremely better. And then, you know what? Surround yourself around successful people. I will tell you that. If you're always around people that... I just wanted to be around people that were much more successful than me, so I could see what success actually looked like. And you know what I found? Is that success looks different for everybody. And one of the things, the biggest success in my life is how I feel about myself. But that takes a lot of work. And I still do therapy today. And you can change your recovery. It doesn't have to be this one size fits all. Whatever, I don't care if you go to NA, AA, Smart Recovery, whatever it is. If you start that way, you can modify it. This has been 12 years I've been modifying my recovery to where it suits Guy, not where it suits other people, right? And that's what works for me. But you learn new techniques and along with the work that you put in.
I believed about myself everything that I saw in the media. I was very aware that my substance use was out of control, and it was calling the shots for a long time. And I believed about myself exactly what that stigma told me. And then within my industry, there's the construction industry, this is real, like, we're all going to do the same thing, but if one of you starts to trip up or get slow, the pep talk is get your shit together or go, right? And then there's the fear of punitive, like being cut loose from your job. So, and I believed all that was justified. I believed all that stigma, and the shame it gave me was unbelievable. And I think when we can offload the burden of shame from people and give them some hope and some opportunity, I think that the answers get really easy. I think the work is always going to be really hard to do, but it's I don't think the answers are really complicated, but it's the place we have to go to on ourselves, and the work we have to do, and the things we have to take accountability for, and the shit we have to let go of. All these personal beliefs that I had about myself were a huge part of the problem, and they were bullshit. They're absolute bullshit. So, stigma was a big part of reinforcing the narrative I was telling myself as a drug user, and who I was as a human being. Undoubtedly, it was a huge part of the problem.
One of the best things I ever learned is, like, you can't actually make me feel any way. You can say what you want. I can run up to you, call you a jerk, and you can either take that on and feel some sort of way. But I can't actually make you feel a certain way. And I think how we live now is we say these words like stigmatizing, and when we repeat the same thing over and over and over. I used to say things like to myself, I'd forget something up the stairs, and I'd be like, oh, I'm such an idiot. And I had a counselor one time stop me, and they were like, don't talk to yourself like that. And I was like, what do you mean? I was just joking. She's like, well, your brain and your heart they're not communicating. So your brain, every single time you say, I'm an idiot, I'm an idiot, I'm an idiot, you believe it. So when we talk about stigma, and we use words like this over and over and over, I feel it's perpetuating the idea that substance use is stigmatizing. It is not. It can be what it is, but we put so much weight in what someone else thinks into our journey and how we feel, and then it delays our growth or our change or our recovery, whatever that looks like. Sorry, I realize this probably isn't like the best answer, but I kind of feel like it has the opposite effect of what it is intended. It is important to talk about, like, hey, you can't actually say that, you know, there are right things and wrong things, all of the things. But we need to stop telling each other that when we fall down, however we fall down, whether it's down a hill or, you know, a pipe or whatever, that we are human beings going through an experience, and it doesn't define who we are. Substance use doesn't define who we are. And unfortunately, there is a very small, I believe, group of people who perpetuate language and have created the narrative of stigma and you know, people that like sit like way up top where I absolutely never want to be, that make us believe that we are stigmatized. Like, there are so many more of us than there are of them, and we've forgotten that, I think. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, 3 minutes. Who wants to take it up?
The normalization in media about the city sweeps, about Vic PD and bylaw and shit all teaming up together. Media, Victoria Buzz, Victoria Vibrant, all of them, Check News, everyone, they're all just like posting this shit for clicks and likes. And realistically, it's no way to end the stigma, you know? It's no way to put an end to it, right? So I see this shit and I've experienced it. I've experienced them ripping apart my tents when I was homeless in Nanaimo, East Van, Surrey, everywhere that I was homeless. I had that shit happen, and East Van was probably the worst. They actually had those huge-ass trucks with the sweepers on it and shit. I don't know what the fuck to call those. But they would literally run through the alleyways and people's tents and stuff like that. They'd come at 4 o'clock in the morning and shit. So I think the post up on social media, you have the community here in town, all behind it, safe at home with wherever they're at. And they're all dropping their comments. Sometimes, I can't lie, I kind of troll them on social media, and I'll just say some shit. You know, I got a lot of time on my hands at home when I'm not doing my things. So yeah, for now. But so I don't know, man. We just got to stop that, and we got to stand together, fuck bylaw, and stop the sweeps. That's all.
All right.
I'd just like to say, stigma is something we talk about so much, about societal stigma towards the people on the street. When I was out there, internalized stigma determined who I would use with. It kept me from accessing services. I didn't trust anybody. I would have looked at me and thought, who's this Pee Wee Herman motherfucker? Fucking what does he know about dope? What does he know about stigma? We need to be patient. It was the entire community that helped me to get better. It was not a service provider. I had, you know, there was one woman that filled out my welfare application because I couldn't read the words on the page. That's how sick I got. So there were times when I needed it, but it was patience and the entire community that helped me out. 1 minute is up.
Do I got 1 minute? Do I got 1 minute? Okay, just quick. It's literally got me a lot of work, so, you know, I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but part of the work that we do is addressing the stigma, and we found that a lot of people actually don't know how to talk about it. And we give them that space, and we talk about it in a way that it's constructive, so that we're getting to a point to where people are actually seeing the human in each other. And once we start there as a basis, it kind of leads to compassion. You know, compassion and understanding is like for the work that we're doing, the biggest way to work through the stigma. And I say work because a lot of outside influences and a lot of our nurture and our nature has taught us how to hold these beliefs that, you know, we find aren't always true. You know, as we grow older and we start calling our own shots, we start realizing that, you know, they call it waking up. I don't like to really call it that. I feel like it's too trendy. But, you know, we start to realize that the world is a lot bigger and it's a lot more complicated and it's a lot more different, than what we were taught. And I think that, aim for compassion and just, start from the heart.
Thanks.
This panel is going to come back for another conversation about what they would do if they ran the world and how they might, what do they wish for people who are still in the thick of things right now, and how might that change. So I'm going to invite Sarah Smith up to give us a very fun way into our break.
I'm Sarah, I work at Piers. Nice to see you all again. I'm here to do a spoken word piece. I'll begin with a bit of a content warning. In it I speak about drug use, child abuse, murdered and missing Indigenous women, survival sex work, but perhaps the most offensive part of it all is that I do it Dr. Seussically. All right? I'll preface by saying that once upon a time, the risks of opioids were reserved for a much smaller population. My uncle was a hardcore heroin addict. He was a criminal, a bank robber, and a jailbird, yet I am grateful. Being diagnosed diabetic at age 6 meant that needles were commonplace all his life. And when we were growing up, needle exchanges were normal. He never expected to live long, and he always walked on the wild side. He died of pancreatic cancer at 44, but was always my solid main male figure growing up. He loved his nieces to pieces, and his lessons are why me and my sister have a deep love for this community and do this work today. So this is a work in progress. Thank you. Hey, y'all. Remember when the Gap was the stroll? That strip where Johns would hungrily troll. Out front, the popular denim store. That's where working girls used to whore. The track, the stroll down on Government Street, in the heart of our pretty pop-up picture book street. When I say the Gap, I think of two things. On the one hand, it's a popular store, but on the other, it's the gap between the rich and the poor. A gaping hole, wretched and stretching each day more and more, chewing and spewing, it's impossible to ignore, swallowing our people and communities whole. But imagine with me, it's the early 90s, scrunchies and acid wash jeans, two working girls strolling outside the shop selling denim, and when we drove by, my aunts making fun of them, how they matchy-matched in scrunchies and skirts. Look, girls, it's the Bobbsey twins. They laughed and smirked. I couldn't comprehend why. I was 12, one of the first times that I understood those girls in shameful short skirts. Those girls, well, they're no better than dirt. Take a poke and pick on the girl on the street, like it's not hard enough to make the ends meet, or it's not so tough making men's on the beat or bending over another car seat. But not my uncle. My Uncle David was sweet. He wouldn't dare utter a peep. He always respected the folks on the street. There we sat at the bus stop outside of the Gap on good old Government Street. Now I'm 14, a summertime runaway, chilling with her cool Uncle Dave, as he listed license plates for his girlfriend, Sandy Lee. Eventually, they split up, and he later got clean, but this was way back when I was just 14. My solid Uncle Dave spotting to keep his love safe, tagging and timing her every date. Funny how we thought nothing of this. What she had to do was just a fact of life for a survival sex-working common law wife. And now he is gone, and so is she. She was murdered and left with no dignity. And that did end up her fate, left on some dead-end road after a bad date. They had long been split up. No one was tagging her license plate. This is what we mean when we say, leave no one behind. When we say stigma kills, we have this in mind. We gotta watch each other's backs. And the past, it was all happening out front of the Gap. Uncle Dave and Sandy Lee, a doped-up couple, but still love-worthy, doing the nod at birthdays and weddings, except for the time Mom had him spend a week in our basement, cold turkey, getting clean from good old-fashioned heroin You get it. And all I can think is what a privilege love is. Someone in your corner who cares if you live. And it's exactly what's missing out here in these endless end days with bylaws sweeping folks into early graves. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes knowing they don't care if you live or die? This awareness is deafening, a cavernous cry echoing from inside this great big gap between health and wealth. Just like my Uncle Dave, only trying to self-medicate, body haunted at a young age when the church left him broken, but still in one piece. His drug use was only trying to find some relief. My mother says, each hand we offer to help up and out becomes one person left pushing them down to the ground. We scramble for Band-Aids, threadbare patches on blistering wounds so many people ignore or simply be blaming the victim for. You see, it's a privilege. That's what real love is. It's someone in your corner who cares if you live. Now we mind the gap and people free fall through the cracks. Breathing spaces narrow and fault lines outline groups of people left behind, and all while capitalism continues off our grind. Listen, the canary is wailing from deep inside the mine. Instead, we shop online, pretend it's all fine, out of sight, out of mind. But we've lost sight of the map. The trains run off the track. We've forgotten every life is a world, a precious person lost to the gap. There's not many in this room, so what do? The gap grows as predicted and compassion evaporates too. The privilege of what real love is someone in your corner who cares if you live. And I think back to my Uncle Dave. Mom still gushes about him to this very day. Everyone loved him in jail, all the guys, she'll say. He had no troubles, no ego. He was always calm and cool. Everyone treated him with respect. He said, when you respect people, they respect you back. He treated paupers as princes, and princes treated him like a king. So now I imagine the gap closing in, loved ones come in close with care and protection, like my Uncle Dave's arm around me when I was just 14 at that bus stop outside the gap. We must not lose sight of what a privilege love is, someone in your corner who cares if you live. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
That was beautiful, Sarah. Okay, quick break. Come on back. We're going to have these 6 people return. We've got Ann Livingston coming up to give us a keynote at the end of the day. We're going to reform the system here in this room today. I'd now like to invite up panelists for our second dialogue. And just, we're going to be talking about, they're going to be imagining that they are the shapers of the world for the current problematic substance user, a phrase that I will try to use now. So back over to you to finish off this conversation.
If you had the ability to fix the challenges that exist today in our society, and you had the power to do it, what would you actually do?
Drug users' rights and any sort of advocacy didn't come from government. It didn't come from health authority. It didn't. The pendulum has swung, and we wait for funding. We fight for funding, kind of like scraps. So yeah, no, I wouldn't want to be in a position of power. I would want to be right where I am right now with my experience, and always remember that before I was even a thought to my parents, we earned rights because we took them. Yeah, I don't want to be in a position of power. I would never want to be up there. Nothing gets done up there. We do it. And then when they say don't do it, we do it anyways. So that's my take.
I'd stop relying on media sources to feed us with all the trash that they're feeding us. I would get out there and, I think the thing that comes to mind is when anytime I'm downtown and you see someone struggling, whether they're, they're sleeping or, nodded out doing their, doing their thing, instead of just walking on by, I would stop, I'd want more people to stop and really check in with them, see where they're at, see what they're, see what they're about, see if they're safe, if they need anything, maybe they're, in need of whatever it is, a coffee, whatever, right? Or maybe they just need, human contact, right? Stop walking by people. More connection is what I'm trying to get at, more connection. We said it earlier, we are human. Just because some people are still, struggling with their own demons and their own addiction, it doesn't take away the fact that they're still human and they deserve love and they deserve the contact and the communication and your time of day, right? Just kind of just be there for them, because that's what we need in this world, and that's what we need a lot more around the city, around other cities around the country and all that stuff. Yeah, no position of power for me too. I agree with that.
Well, I'll turn it, and I'll be, if I was in a position of power, what I'd first off do is I'd eradicate poverty. That is the first thing that I would do. Listen, you can look at the reflection of what we did during the pandemic. If you can imagine, if we gave people $600 a month to survive, the backlash that would have raced across the country from people who did have employment jobs that lost them during the pandemic, but yet it's okay that we offer people who are struggling in poverty $600 a month to survive. We also used to have the reflection of MLAs that once a month they would go and live on a welfare check in an SRO. They stopped doing it because they wouldn't survive. They ran out of food. So our challenges really of why we have the enormity in our society today is relatively caused by poverty. Poverty makes people survive. It forces you to do things outside of your comfort zone just in order to live. And so that, in the sense, is that if you raise the basic income rates for people on income assistance to what the CERB was, I think you're going to see a lot more people be able to afford the rent to get a place to live, to afford to have a little bit more food. I think those are the challenges that are really created a lot of the challenges that we see today. So that would be, if I had the power to do that, I'd eradicate that and make sure that people had the housing stability. Housing security is the other topic. I mean, you can't beat anything without housing. Like, if you don't have mentally, addiction, whatever it is you're struggling with, if you don't have a safe place to live, and then the struggle that ensues with that, survival on the street, people use drugs to stay up at night, to stay alert, to stay warm. When you look at all the factors that go into that, it's very, very hard for anybody to recover from anything, any health condition. I don't care what you have, but it's very challenging when you have those two rolling. And so I would start there. If you could start there, I can guarantee you we'd see a lot better success in the challenges that we face of the other social determinants of health. So you guys can redo your answers if you want.
I was just going to say, I will challenge that. I think that there are many marginalized groups that we have given lots of money to, and that isn't a solution. I think that we, of course, having a stable place to live, but yeah, printing more money and buying our way out of it isn't supportive. Whichever the background is, it's like community, connection, understanding, and I think for a lot of the services that I've worked for, We do this thing where, we hand out coffee, we hand out pre-made meals, we treat adults like children, and then when something happens in their life and they have a meltdown like a child, and then we're shocked because they're an adult. And we're like, well, you can't behave that way. So now you're banned from the service for 24 hours, 48 hours. I'll just challenge. That's what I would challenge. Working in this industry, handing things out it's not helpful. We need to give opportunity, connection, family chosen or not. Meet people where they're at.
I agree with both of the last speakers who were a little bit on opposite ends there. So we need more funding. Not everyone is going to be able to just get it together because they stop using drugs. I think I had 15 jobs probably in my first year and a half living in a recovery facility. I couldn't even look people in the eye. But the people who helped me didn't even know they were helping me. It wasn't services that were designed and passed down to me. I went and I joined a swing dancing class as an example. There's a dude in recovery that used to take me every Friday, and that allowed me to look people in the eye, to speak. I didn't have anxiety that would cloud my thinking. I went and joined a journaling group in a homeless shelter because I wanted to be a journalist. That moment just gave me the ability to imagine life being different. If we can't imagine life being different, we have no hope. So I think we do need some money. We're going to have to spend some money to get out of this, but we need to provide stable housing that is designed for the people we're trying to help, and we're not really doing that. I got to be honest with you, everything Tasia said was accurate as well, so I'm a little bit confused now after hearing all of this, but we need more of everything is the simple answer. We see people buying substances that are just so incredibly dangerous. I spend so much time at my desk that I just said that I live directly above the drug checking project. We need safe supply. We need more recovery facilities. We need better housing and more housing. I can't imagine us getting out of this right now, but we need patience. So keep it up. I'm so happy that we're all here. Cheers.
Fred.
5 minutes isn't long enough to really talk about and dive into that conversation, I feel like. But I guess, to start, if you imagine myself, like if I imagine myself like a mirror and I was broken, I feel like a lot of times to help put me back together were a lot of service providers that were doing work way beyond the scope of their jobs, and not because they had to, but because they needed to. They saw that there was somebody in need and they just did the work, even though the job description didn't say that, even though they didn't have time, even though they weren't getting paid for that, even though there was a lot of things why they didn't need to be doing what they were doing. And when I look at like working in the downtown east side since 2016 and working like mainly with nonprofits, I'm sorry to say I had to join the other side, and now I'm working for profit because it is so damn expensive to live anywhere, and work for anybody that is underfunded, that is not stable. The funding is not going to be guaranteed there next year. And, but it's work I love. It's work I'm passionate about. So if I could change, one thing, it would be the funding structures and the funding models, to change them from they're at 2 and 5 years. I believe most of the funding that a lot of the organizations I work for go for. And it takes a lot longer than 2 or 5 years for us to kind of establish a relationship with people that are, and when I say people, I mean me too, because I was there and I still could be there. People that are dealing with so many issues, concurrent disorders, problematic substance use, estranged from community and family. Someone I felt like I was very lost, and if we're going to get to know these folks and provide really good services and really support them and through their life, we need to be there for longer than 2 or 5 years. So, when I talk about funding, we need to keep those good people in those good jobs who love their work, and we need to pay them well enough so that they can stay there. Because right now it's not working. We've had so many places where we've lost so many good workers, and they just had to leave because they couldn't afford to stay anymore. Their work wasn't paying their rent, or they have to sacrifice between paying their bills and food. And I'm like, that's not too familiar to me. I grew up on welfare. I grew up in poverty, extreme poverty. So, that sounded very, very familiar to me. So I totally understood when they had to leave. What I never understood or wrapped my head around is how, the people who are kind of making these policies that are tied to the funding are not seeing it from my side. But now seeing it from my side, I understand is because they don't have people like us at their tables when they're talking about funding. They don't have people. We're not at those tables. But what gives me hope is that we're starting to get in there. We're doing the work because we're breaking down those walls. We're pushing our way in. And that's what we have to do. That's what we keep having to do, because at the other end of it, as like the third, I don't know if it's the third or the fourth Indigenous nation that has called for a state of emergency, but these things have been happening in smaller communities for so long, and they're happening more so now than ever because, the stigma or just the conversation around drug use is so heavy and it's so fucking scary that it's hard to have that conversation. And it's hard to go, where do we start? But, it starts with us, and we just got to keep doing the work, and we're getting there. We're able to start calling our own shots.
I look at how the system works, and when it comes to politics and power, they do what gets them elected again. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to go out to people that are outside of this room and start showing people how they can be part of solutions, empowering them to save lives. I think the feedback I get from some people on the right side of my family is that some of this stuff feels pushed down their throats and forced, and it's seems hopeless sometimes. And when I start speaking about the opportunity in harm reduction, the opportunity in recovery resources, and building into that, and reminding them that I'm like one example of what it can look like. There's other examples up here on the stage of what that can look like. And, they start to open their ideas to this. I think fundamentally, I just believe people want to get on board with things that are going to make a difference and save lives. I treat everybody that way until they prove that they're a sociopath. I think aside from poverty reduction, which is like a huge part of the thing, I think non-market housing is important. I think we look at a system right now, although our paths to recovery are not linear, the journey and the tools and the systems that are laid out should be. Right now, I feel like they're very circular. We get access to one thing, we get allowed a certain amount of leash or distance or guidance, and then we'll return back to where we started, which is an environment that has no barriers against us and the challenges that got us in hot water in the first place. And so I think, what I want to see is no barrier access to treatment options. I think treatment options should look different. I think we need more new roads. I think we need more long-term 2-year projects that can immerse people into a new way of life. For me, the answer was simple. I had to change everything. It takes a long time to deprogram and to get used to yourself in your new skin, to learn a new identity, a new way of showing up in the world. I think there needs to be a lot more shorter-term versions, and we can't have a fucking clicker counter at the door every time you go in and come out. I think as a society, we need to get used to the fact that if you're engaged in seeking the answers you need, that's success. That's what it looks like. And every inch that you claw in and manage to grab and inch forward or upwards or whatever direction is important to you, you can get. That is, like for me, and it's been said on the stage, like for me to still 6 years in, it's like the hardest thing I've ever done, continues to be. And I think we need to start letting people know that doesn't change. I'd like to see more people with who have achieved a higher state of well-being or consistency or contentedness in life, who have achieved something better than where they were seeing their personal destruction. Like, I want to see more of those stories. I want to see what your recovery looks like and how you got your kids back. I want to know that it doesn't mean abstinence. Because right now, I think socially we attach a lack of abstinence to being in the same situation you're in. But I see proof of that every day. I grew up in a family of people that can manage their substance use. And if you came back to 20,000 feet, it hasn't always been a successful management system. But they didn't lose anything. They didn't lose their lives. I want to see more aftercare. I want to see a system, again, on that lineal path that gives people an opportunity to move forward, but slip back and still get caught by the system, rather than return to the place where they were, their darkest place. Until my mother passed away and we sold the house, I still couldn't go down to that basement. So if I was forced, that's where I was going to end up after treatment. We need to look at a lifetime model of care for people, and this is a public health thing. This should be on the public dime. My mom pulled $30,000 out of her retirement fund for me to go and get care. And I had the good fortune of I hadn't burnt every bridge. I still had some people, including some really far right thinking people in my family, that when it became me and it was about me getting well, they were all behind me all the way. And so I think there's that. I think we need to quit separating mothers from their children. I think I love a foster system. I love the idea of community rallying together to lift people up, not just organizations, but I love the idea of foster families bringing in young women or women and their children and supporting them in their parenting duties while they get better in the same household together so they can leave and get access. I want to see a grant, a life rescue grant or reset grant for young people wanting to get a handle on this, that can offer them an opportunity to an organized payment of debt with a tax-free loan or an interest-free loan, but also the opportunity to get caught up immediately, no questions asked, on their life expectancy, their life expenses. We need to take accountability of the destruction, our financial destruction, those credit card bills. But how about the community helps me get my rent squared away and my phone paid off? What about covering people that go to access treatment or long-term care? Why are we not covering their expenses so their families can afford to live while they're in there? Take my tax money, spend it on that. I'll be very grateful. But convincing the voting constituency that that's the right direction, that they should vote for those changes, we are preaching to the choir today. The hard work is talking to the people that don't understand. And the heartbreaking reality, I think, is that the heartbreaking opportunity on the horizon is that more and more, there's fewer and fewer people in our province who haven't been directly affected by this, haven't lost that loved one. And that's going to catch up with government and politics soon too. I don't know how far away it is, but I just don't want to lose lives in the meantime. And so I think, we got to convince people out there that there's something that can be done. You can be a part of it, and you can be proud of being a part of it. Because there's opportunity. And if anybody's struggling, I say stick with it. You matter, you're important, recovery's possible, it's messy, it's hard. There is a path through to it. It's just not going to be obvious. And if it was easy, everybody would find it.
So I'm going to invite up Ann Livingston to close us out with a few words. I don't know how many of you know Ann, but I'm a former media person, even though I agree with all the things about media, just to be clear. But Ann, I've known Ann and written about Ann for 30 years, back to when her and Dean Wilson were doing the racy stuff to get some harm reduction in a time when I don't even know if we had that word. So I'm a big admirer of Ann, really looking forward to hearing you.
I tend to be a person who starts drug user groups. So I was going to just briefly outline that and say, I moved to Vancouver with 3 little kids. I was on welfare. I lived in a housing co-op that happened to be next to a fire hall, and it was sirens, sirens, sirens. We had a huge peak in overdoses and a massive outbreak of HIV. And my mother had always taught me that if you want to do anything in the community, go to the people who are most affected by it, and you start organizing them directly. So it wasn't really my fault that I'm a drug user organizer. And then, so we did that from about 1993, and Vandu was formed and funded, but it wasn't initially very funded. So I found that my method of organizing, which was again an imitation of my mother, I didn't know I was going to do mother worship on here, but so when I meet the drug users, I would invite them over to the housing co-op, and I had this 3-bedroom, you know, you could roller skate through they're big units. They were built in the 80s. I don't know, you construction people know. They build tiny places now. And so I would have them over and, you know, make tea or whatever. And it very gradually started to realize that they were street drug users and they had never been invited into anybody's home who had little children. Like this kind of, oh yes, we're going to start a nonprofit society, or, you know, this kind of methodology. So I think that is a startling thing, and it creates that kind of, there's no funding involved, there were no government grants at that point. And of course, you do try to get those kind of things. So that was the sort of spirit at which I approached my work. So you don't really need funding. It's nice to have a living room to do it in. But I felt like I was the welfare queen in the sense that the single people on welfare got very, very tiny checks. And my check looked huge compared to theirs. Plus, I'm in subsidized housing, so I wasn't having to spend every single dime on rent, which you would now, for sure. They do not. The welfare rates are so low, they should be charged with a crime. And it would really be worth at least saying, okay, well, let's just, if we don't want to do a big giveaway because that upsets people, fine, let's just go back to what proportionally you would get in the 70s now for welfare. And it's a substantial thing because they have not kept up anywhere close to inflation, which I guess I don't need to remind people in this room. So I said, I have a hypothesis now, after 30 years of doing this, that if a community does not have a drug user group, they're not going to get shit. And they might get shit, but they're not going to keep it. So that's my... it won't be sustained. So the advantages of a drug user group is that they persist always, and they take little or no funding, because I've done it with no funding on welfare, just using my, like I'm a crazy cheap person, but I always figure if I can't have a meeting and have 30 people in the room and give each one of them $5 and I'm on welfare, come on, Ann, you can get that money off somebody. You know, it's just not a lot of money. And if you can get the room rental for free, so it's about churches and libraries, and mostly not churches, but I'm so glad that something good's happening in a church. So the other one is that they have the higher moral ground. Right now, you look at the data and you say, hi, I'm a drug user. We've got a drug user union, and we're demanding that we are citizens of this country. We have been identified as a group of people who have a disability. We have an illness. We're not getting medical treatment, and they're really, really wanting to put us in jail. There is nobody that you will meet that doesn't say that's the higher moral ground. What, are they going to defend arresting people who are sick? Are they going to defend not giving proper citizenship to people who were born in Canada? Ironically, many of them had their land stolen, you know, I mean, they're really, really from Canada. So anyway, so I think the higher moral ground's good, and then drug user groups are inherently political, because anything you go to do, you run up against politics. So if you're acting as a group of volunteers, then what do? You go to city council. That's what citizens do. And you say, or you go to the police board, and you say the cops are beating our people up, or these arrests aren't making any sense, and the police are arresting people just so they can get overtime hours, and we're encouraging the worst kind of policing with the kind of policies we have, and you need to look at that. You know, all of the things that you go to do are inherently political, and you're not like service providers, which are service provision is extremely costly. To run a not even 12-hour-a-day outdoor smoke tent is $1 million per year, because I wrote the proposals for them and then got denied them, just saying, if you've read them. It's a BC bids process, and it's not their fault that it costs that much, because they always say this much staffing, these wages, blah, blah, blah. So, but it is important that the public really understand how much things cost, and it puts service providers in a whole different category, because they can't really piss off people and lose their funding, because they've got people that are employed by them who have mortgages to pay and children, and they should be respected as service providers. But a drug user group, that's a whole different beast, just saying. So they're inherently political, you know, whatever it is. Right now we're fighting hospital stuff, and the doctors, oh my God, who knew? The Doctors for Safer Drug Policy just showed up. So the disadvantage of drug user groups is that we fight like hell, and people who use drugs who are seen as criminals or bad guys or amoral or weak and blah, 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 you know the shit stuff. Then they become heroic community volunteers, and they put up a tent, and they persist there, and they're willing to get arrested. That's like, anyway, they don't always get arrested, and we can't always get in court. But Dolph's a good example. Everyone keep your eyes on Dolph for this court case coming up. It's going to be very, very important. So I've run like 9 tents over many, many periods. I could never get arrested. I'm just saying, not that I was so eager when my kids were little to get arrested, but I'm just saying they don't want the case to go to court because they know we're going to win in court. And if not, how could we not win in court? We have the higher moral ground. Oh, yeah. You're just going to leave people to die in an alley. So anyway, that's been, okay. Then the disadvantage is that when we do this, we demand that public health adopt these as public health policies, fund NGOs, which are never the user groups, and then they implement harm reduction, and now that person has become a client who doesn't obey the rules. The same person who was in that tent heroically designing, meeting every day, doing it for free, you know what I mean? So this is an interesting phenomena that we face. So that's a disadvantage of the user group phenomena, and I think we need to look at that, just saying. And then the other comparison that I like to make, because there's a lot of recovery stuff here, and I've been to 1,000 I wasn't the alcoholic, but I was married to one for many years, and I went to thousands of AA meetings, open ones, you know, the ones you're allowed to go to. And then, but what occurs to me is that these movements both evolved from people being criminals. Now, if you were an alcoholic in the United States during Prohibition, you were a criminal. Especially if you were poor, you were definitely arrested. And if you were poor and black, you were definitely arrested. You know, there was all this dealing and gangsters. You know, it was a tremendously criminalized movement. So even being a drinker wasn't just that you were an immoral, weak person who had no, you know, willpower. You were actually a criminal. And they had criminal records. I mean, it just occurred to me one day. And then I realized that both movements, to the drug user group movement and the recovery movement or 12-step or whatever, they had to buck a system. My understanding that the treatment for alcoholism was that you had to go to this sanitarium for, crazy people or whatever they called them, sort of a madhouse model, and then they would force you to drink every day. And these guys said this didn't work for them, so they had this whole Oxford group thing. I mean, it was a resistance against I don't know if they had to fight off criminalization. They certainly had to fight off their own crushed lives because of criminalization and being viewed as criminals. And that is a huge parallel between when alcohol was made illegal and drugs made illegal. And the other thing that I think is another parallel is they're both run by volunteer governance structures, and they can run with almost no money. Like, yeah, just fund us and see what happens. They've disfunded us before and saw what happened, and we just kept going. Drug user groups can keep operating, especially, the first iteration I was saying, they came to my living room. They all had my home number. I mean, they'd have to find a phone, but they knew where I lived. They could buzz my buzzer. And so it was a different thing than saying, well, how you have to set healthy boundaries, and you're not allowed to have your clients come to your home, and I don't know, you service provider people must know more about this than me. I just know that those things are tossed around, and these are often done for very good reasons, because someone might be exploiting someone to, do work for less than minimum wage, or even sexual exploitation. We won't get into that too much because of the 13 stepping. But anyway, so my complaint, here's my complaint. They keep saying that recovery's over here, and drug user groups are encouraging drug use. And when I get mad enough with the recovery people, it was Giuseppe. Does everyone know who this guy is? Anyway, I said, look, I'm a mother on welfare. I put up a tent in the downtown east side. We said this is a smoke tent and an injection site because fentanyl hit in 2016, and that's what we did. Why don't you come and put a tent in the alley right there and put recovery on it? And it was all, well, I'm not going to give up my recovery. I might get triggered. I'm going, I've got children. I said, I've got children? Like, I'm the worst. I could be the worst mother in the world. I've missed a lot of birthdays, just saying. But anyway, the other thing is that because we also need this relationship. If I don't want people to relapse, oh my God, I'm a terrible drug user. I've never succeeded at using drugs. I'm not encouraging people to use drugs. I know the cost. It's absolutely startling to someone who's never really been up close with a drug user or an alcoholic or whatever, someone who's got substance use disorder, to just see how much of their life they will give away for that being high. That is the most valuable thing. And it's a hard thing to finally just get to the point in your life where you go, people either use drugs or they don't. And you have no emotion either way, which is still challenging to me sometimes. But most of the time I go, oh yeah, they either use drugs or they don't. And you need to be that detached, or you're secretly working in the background and setting yourself up for disappointment, or kind of a subtle cruelty towards that person because they've disappointed you. But I think that within the recovery movement, people can become extremely ashamed that they're relapsing. And what I want to say to them is, here's my card for a safe relapse, call Ann. And then I would take them to a drug user group and say, for God's sake, don't buy dope from someone you don't know, and don't use it alone, which is exactly what you will do if you're trying to hide the fact that you had a relapse. The good old days of nice private little relapses, except for alcoholics who can do it, is over. They will find you dead. And so this is this, and I think that people, the recovery movement's losing as many people as we're losing in the drug user group movement, which is sort of human rights for drug users and ending the prohibition against these drugs, which not everyone necessarily is going to agree on. So I think, and I do think that's the goal, we tinker with these molecules. They're going to keep making some new, deadly, worse molecule, and then they're going to make another worse, deadly molecule. And if you haven't been following this is what's going on. And at some point, it's like alchemy. It's like those fairy tales where they take the straw and he spins it into gold. You can just take a bunch of molecules and make a ton of money. And so I finally did some math the other day. So this is my math. 99 pounds, 42 kilograms of drugs that could kill you are sold every single day on the streets of British Columbia, just British Columbia. That's $1.6 billion market per year, and that's this huge underestimate. So I want people to argue with me because I don't want to get caught by some right-wing asshole who tells me I did my math wrong. 225,000 people spend $20 per day on dope. We know crystal meth's cheap, or I think it is. I don't buy it, but I'm just, it's my sense. And other drugs can be much more expensive. But if you do that, who spends $20 a day on drugs? Tons of people spend way more. And in that, I'm including the recreational, the 100,000 and the 125,000 non-recreational, maybe daily dependent. So I think it's a huge underestimate. But that's what we need to keep telling the public. So as you're worried about these, dillies or whatever the hell's flying around out there, and honestly, do they not know that Pill Corner's been called Pill Corner for 25 years? Everyone's bought and sold pills long before something called Safe Supply, which is evidently killing people. And the political narrative on this is absolutely bonkers. So anyway, here's my dream. They didn't ask me to do this, but I heard them having their dream. So make me queen bitch of the world. I'll tell you, I want a coalition of people who keep moving forward with good in the good political times. So when we get the OPSs that they actually open, and we're like pushy. They announced OPSs. When they said they were going to do involuntary treatment, you know what I said? They'll never do it. They never did OPSs when they announced them. Like, are you kidding me? Coquitlam, no OPS. I don't know, name it. Burnaby? I don't even know if Burnaby has one or not. I hate to be wrong too much, especially in public. But, you know, there's tons and tons and tons of places. The reason there's an OPS in Nanaimo, and they're here, raise your hands, Nanaimo people. This is the Nanaimo Area Network of Drug Users. Nanaimo is a death zone. We get very little. We have a tiny amount of funding. We meet at the library. But for the most part, these guys heroically took over. We rented a car lot with a little office, and I said, it's the only place I can find it was really cheap, and I just figured we'd have an office. And within a day or two, we had 100 people, or within a month, or I don't know how long, 100 people a day, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when we shut that, of course, the RCMP called up the owner of the land and threatened him with civil forfeiture. This is another whole topic. We need to do a whole thing on civil forfeiture. And he wouldn't release to us, but we were there for a full year. And when we shut down, the overdoses in Nanaimo doubled, and they had already opened the $1 million one. That was only open from 11 till 8:30. It's still only open 11 to 8:30, which just burns my ass. So when we get an OPS, we all need to push to say, you can't shut an OPS at 8:30 at night. You know what I mean? To do that kind of, just keep going that extra mile and keep the pressure on and keep the pressure on in the good times. That's when we're getting funding. And as Guy, where are you, Guy? Guy's got doomsday politics coming towards us. Well, we basically have the same strategy in the good times and the bad times, which is persist, persist, persist. So a strategy to confront and condemn the endless increases to police budgets. I don't know if you're noticing this. They always get an increase. And when they take money and give it to the police, it means there's less money for recreation for our children. And, you know, anyway, it's really true. And and they've never not, the Vancouver City Council one year denied an increase to the Vancouver Police Department. They went to the Solicitor General, and he told the City Council, City of Vancouver, had to give them the increase. And I thought, well, who is in charge of the police then? It's not clear to me, and it's worse when it's CRCMP. And in Nanaimo, CRCMP never met with us once, ever, not once. And there's been a version of Nandu for 5 years, and we ask all the time. Bylaws won't meet with us. We get these strange kind of, you know, it's kind of like an ick factor. Somehow they're going to catch something if they meet with us. So anyway, that's my dream, is that we start to really have a political strategy where we're saying, what is our education strategy? What's our media strategy? What's our community organizing strategy? Because the legal strategy and the advocacy, it gets old. At some point, you really need to follow up on every single case of someone being kicked out of a hospital by a security guard at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's never a good idea. I don't know who invented this idea. And if they get a complaint every single time, you'll see changes. And that's what persistence is. That's the little user group that could. We just keep going and going and going. So anyway, the bigger picture is also, as part of this strategy, that the public knows where their money's going. Their money is being squandered now. If you even look at the Canadian it's Health Canada money. It's the strategic plan for drugs, or whatever, the strategic plan for drugs federally. I've got the letters wrong. But most of that money went to enforcement. I was just shocked. 8% went to harm reduction. And then we have to listen to this prattle about harm reduction's overfunded and they're encouraging drug use. Meanwhile, the money really has gone to police, and that's Health Canada. That's not even the police budget, which is a whole other thing. So when we need that real way we can share this information with ourselves and with each other and make either beautiful little films, whatever really, really works, and memes. And so I'll use social, I don't know how to do any of that stuff, but I know it's extremely, extremely effective. But if we don't have, this is my thing. I want the recovery people at the table. I want the drug user people at the table. We'll put up with the service providers as long as they behave. And you know, because you don't want a group of people there saying, don't do that because we might lose our funding. We have to dream big and be bold and have that strategy not interfered with by the consideration about whether you're going to lose funding. Because I don't know if you've noticed, we can suck up all we like and we'll still lose funding. Some things that we can't control, we need to sort of just we're beyond constantly reacting to and putting out small fires, and we've got a bigger plan because we need to get these drugs regulated. They will not stop poisoning. As far as I can tell, I've been at it a long, long time, and I think people who don't believe that yet, that should be part of our education strategy. People should be able to say, oh no, I don't think that's right. And we should be able to go back to heroin, go back to cocaine, and say, you know, if given the choice, what would you do? And we don't know what people would do because they just basically take whatever drugs they can buy on the street. And that's the real hell of it. The 100 pounds a day, $42 million a day, $1.6 billion a year, and that's what the public needs to know is completely unworkable, and those people don't get arrested. It's huge crystal meth lab. Did you notice there was no criminal charges? None. Not one that I've heard of anyway. And the same thing with the big fentanyl lab near Kamloops, and then there's a fentanyl lab in northern Alberta. You know, these are massively large. I kept saying, how much is 5 tons of crystal meth? Would it fill like this? Like, how big is that? You know what I mean? This is where we need to really capture the imagination and understanding of the public to see what they're up against. Thank you very much. This is a lovely thing to bring people together, and this is part of the solution.
Thanks so much, Anne. That was so wonderful. I feel actually inspired and ready to persist. Thank you to everyone for being part of like a really amazing series. It's just been so good, and we're all fired up to try to somehow keep this going.
Thank you everyone so much for coming. We really appreciate the turnout and support for these events. As Jody mentioned, we're going to try to keep it going. Please keep your eyes peeled to our website. We're also uploading what we've been filming here today and the last couple events on our website as well, so please share with your family and friends or folks that couldn't make it. Just trying to get this education awareness out as well as we can.